Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, or even good evening, wherever you are in this globe. And many thanks for joining us for this live webinar. So, as you know, World Science Day is today, and then at ISF we thought, what is the better way to celebrate than speaking about one of the recent discovery and research side of what plant breeders use. What is genome editing? We know that this is something. Revolutionizing the plant breeding, giving new aspects and new possibilities. So we believe that is something that plant breeders can use in the future. On the other hand, there are many misconceptions, false information about genome editing. So we believe that it's important to get the facts straight. And for this reason, ISF produced a series of one-pagers. We call them genome editing facts. They are available on our website, and we're also doing a little bit of social media campaign around it with the same purpose to get the facts straight. So today in this live webinar, I would like to touch on some of those topics, which is already part of this genome editing facts one pager. So if you have any comments, please shoot us, or if you have questions, I will also try to answer them in the second part of this live webinar. So please, let's start with the first question. So where did gene editing came from? I think it's a very interesting and important question, and we know that classically breeders and plant scientists and scientists in general, they're pretty much reliant on the discovery and an analysis of spontaneous mutation. Or like random mutagenesis using different chemical agents. And maybe not many people know that the first really targeted genetic changes were produced already in the 1970s, but on yeast and mice, therefore really for research purposes. But it was already very precise, but it was rather time-consuming and inefficient. And as we are going towards the history and realize that the secret of the high efficiency of genome editing is the ability to make targeted DNA double strand breaks in the chromosomal sequence or in the genome, in the part of the genome of our interest. So these double-stranded breaks can stimulate targeted changes, can have a few base pair changes, which is also was not really new. But then we realized that the cell itself has a natural DNA repair mechanism which can induce this kind of targeted changes. So basically, in the early 2000s, we have some methods in use called Talon and zinc fingers, which were again highly precise but they were rather laborious methods and not very widely accessible. And also, there are some products which has been made with those methods, but the widespread of use haven't been really happened. So, what is really revolutionized plant breeding and the use of genome editing is the discovery of the CRISPR-Cas9 complex. I think everybody knows about that. Emmanuel Charpentier and Jennifer Doudna received a Nobel Prize for chemistry for this discovery. So this is the one which really give a big boost for research and also for product development. Not just in plants, but obviously we are here as plant breeders. We would like to use for this aspect. So this CRISPR-Cas9 complex was able to precisely cut the DNA and then let the natural DNA repair process to take over. And I think this happened. It's relatively new. I mean, this happened 7-8 years ago. So we are speaking about something which is really fresh, but already widespread. If you see all the researches and applications, both in the public or the private sector. But also, this is a kind of evolving field of technology. So today we have many varieties of Cas proteins and other systems than CRISPR, And also there are new ways called, for instance, base editing or prime editing, which able to do the small edits on the genome without inducing a double-stranded break. So this is still evolving, and we are still not the end of this process. So I hope this explained a little bit of the history of the genome editing and where we are coming from. How does gene editing improve plant breeding? I would say in many ways. As we know, and I hinted at that in the past, breeders are greatly relying on the genetic variability that can be found in nature. So genome editing is basically a way how to introduce more genetic variation to plants in a more precise way, and a more precise and efficient way, because in the past we relied on this spontaneous mutation happened in nature, and they are happening very frequently, but we know that because it's spontaneous, we don't know what will be the outcome. And also breeders used, for instance, chemicals or even radiation to introduce genetic variation. But these are also random. So when a cell was bombarded with radioactive ions, the outcome was pretty unpredictable. So it could have been anything. So there will be a really long process to select those ones which mutation were beneficial for the breeding purpose, whether it's for agricultural purpose or nutritional value or others. Why with genome editing, it's more precise, more efficient, and it's faster. So like a good example, in the past, when breeders wanted to introduce new characteristics, for instance, they wanted to introduce a resistance, a disease resistant characteristics. They had to look for sources in the nature, in a wild type, in a wild relatives, and then they started crossing and back crossing to have this new characteristic in the genome, but also retain all the other important characteristics of the elite varieties. And it takes many crosses, many years. Right now, if they make a small changes and they know the function of the gene which causing the resistance, they just can change this small sequence in this particular part of the gene, and they make it the elite line already resistant without having the very laborious work of many crossing and selection. So this is really speed up the process. Also, I think it's a very good example for another kind of improvement and benefits from the breeder's perspective, that many of our crops are polyploid. Many of our important domesticated crops are polyploid, so they have multiple chromosomes. So the same gene has many copies. For instance, this is the case in many cereals, in many in other crops like in potato. So it means that if a breeders want to improve a characteristics, they have to do it in these multiple alleles on the genome, and they have to do it simultaneously. And potentially it could have been done in earlier methods, but it would have taken like decades to reach this point. Right now, with genome editing, these kind of changes can be made simultaneously. So those crops which has been difficult to breed in the past, these new methods will give additional boost and additional possibility. And also, maybe what is really not really known, because when we are speaking about genome editing, we're also thinking about like characteristics. We have to improve disease resistance, we improve nutritional value, so we are focusing this kind of traits. But also with genome editing, we can do much more. We can have studies on gene discovery, on different gene functions, but also there are certain parts of the chromosome or the genome which are pretty much locked for breeding, because it's in the part of the chromosomes where recombination doesn't happening, for instance. So with genome editing, we can make accessible those parts of the genome, for instance, that were not possible earlier, but still using conventional breeding techniques in the later stage. So I think these are a few examples which are somehow clarifies that what kind of improvement breeders can make using genome editing. Oh, it's a good one. Are gene-edited crops the same as GMOs? And yeah, you got this question many times for sure. And I think the best way to answer it first to clarify what are we consider GMOs. So we consider GMOs transgenic plants, which has been developed by breaking the species barriers, basically, because with the transgenic plants, we introduce a foreign gene, a gene from a different species, a gene from a sexually incompatible species to our germplasm. So we broke this kind of barriers, and we had the gene in the plant gene, which is originated from, for instance, from bacteria or virus. So this is what we are calling in GMOs. With gene editing, you can produce GMOs, for instance. I think this maybe I should start with that one. But most of the application today, what plant breeders are using genome editing technologies, they are working within the gene pool of the same species. So they don't break this kind of boundaries. These are usually very small changes, a few base pair changes in the genome, a deletion or insertion or addition. But certainly these are not GMOs, and they shouldn't be regulated as GMOs for sure. And also, many of these changes, as I alluded to in my earlier speaking, could have been introduced by earlier breeding methods, which are also not considered GMOs. So I think we pretty much have to take a kind of approach which is proportionate. So we don't need to look at the genome editing as a whole. We need to, as a technique, as a process, we need to look at the outcome. We need to look at the product. And if the product doesn't contain foreign gene, or this product could have been produced by earlier breeding methods, random mutation or crossing and selection, obviously they are not breeding methods. And I don't want to speak about too much regulation here, but many governments who started thinking and already put in place regulation worldwide on genome editing, they pretty much took this approach when they decided on the scope of this product, whether it should be regulated as GMOs or biotech or as conventional products. Is it safe? Yeah, this is also a really frequently asked questions, and let me start answering this question a little bit, speaking about the breeding process. So, genome editing or targeted mutagenesis has more or new breeding techniques. So there are many ways we can call these areas are not a standalone application. It's part of the breeding cycle. So we always have to put in the context of plant breeding as such. So we are introducing this new variation with genome editing, yes, but still these new lines will be crossed, back crossed. They will be also selected. They will go to field trials, certain kind of analysis, field trials for many generations in the companies domain, so done by the companies, but also in many countries there are field trials which are compulsory and done by the governments or the regulatory agency. So these are a very rigorous procedure which every breeder put in place, and also in some countries regulated. And also, I think what is good to know that even if these products won't be regulated as GMOs because they are as like conventional products, they are subject to other regulations like any other conventional variety. So they will be regulated. They will be regulated, but not as GMOs. They will be regulated as a conventional variety. So there are food safety regulation in every country which needs to be complied with. there are phytosanitary regulations, there are seed laws, there are variety registrations. So many legislatory species when a variety needs to go through to be put on the market. So, and this is irrespective the technology which has been used, whether it's conventional breeding or genome editing. I think about safety, this pretty much covers up. It is expensive. Yeah, it's relative, huh? What is expensive, what is it's not. I think the better way to explain, just to look at what is going on in the research and development area. So we really see a very diverse range of developers doing different kind of genome editing application plans. We see small private companies. We see large multinational companies, of course. We see many public researchers who are using this technology. So it's relatively affordable technology. Of course, you need a great deal of knowledge. You have to know about molecular genetics, molecular biology. You need to have a decent lab background. So you need to have those tools, of course. But compared to, for instance, producing a transgenetic plan, it's cheaper and much more accessible. And I think the good answer is, again, just to know what's happening in the research field and see this very diverse range of developers. Of course, and the other question is related to this. This is a proprietary technology. So there are patent holders and license holders who owns this technology. First and foremost, most of them are public institutes. I think it's important to clarify. The second important thing is, until you do research and development, it's free. So it's accessible and you don't have to pay for it. After you commercialize a product, of course, it's subject to some license agreement and contract, but it's proportionate of the revenue you will gain with this new product. And also, it's a good example that there are not many commercialized products on the market at the moment. There are basically two products we are aware of. And one product is the high oleic soybean in the US, and the other is the high GABA tomato in Japan. And both products have been developed by small companies. One of them is basically a joint venture of a public research company and the small developers. I think this also demonstrates that there are ways to develop these varieties, even and these products, even for smaller stakeholders. So this shouldn't be a kind of boundary of this kind of development. Potentially, what is a little bit more concerning is the regulatory background. So if there really we have an over-regulated area, this could have mean additional cost, which probably will be a kind of cutoff points for many companies and potentially smaller companies, and public researchers cannot really meet those costs, and they cannot bear those expenses. Yeah, I think it's, again, hopefully we will use companies can use this technology in the future. So we will have a regulatory framework which is allow the use of technologies in many countries, and because it depends, of course, not just the seed trade, which is very international, but also in the trade of commodities or food products. So this harmonized and aligned science-based regulatory framework is important to really have products which are helping farmers to use these genome-edited varieties. The benefits are wide-ranging. I think the first one that with this genome editing, you can improve variety in many ways. You can have disease resistance varieties. You can have better yielding varieties. You have varieties with a better nutrient component, you have drought-tolerant varieties. So there are many aspects, and as I said, probably these varieties can come to the market faster than in the past. So I think this is one benefit. Another benefit, and what we are seeing from publication and some of the research and product development, that it's been used in a wide range of varieties. If you see the literature is more than 50 crops where market-oriented research are being done at the moment. So it's not just about 4 or 5 staple and big arable crops, but crops which I would say smaller crops or underutilized crops, and they are very much left out from the breeding efforts in the past decade. So and right now it's a kind of second chance for this with underutilized crops to benefit something from this new technology. And usually these are species which are very important for small communities, for local varieties which can be improved now using this kind of technology. So I think this is very good example what farmers can benefit. But again, we have to wait and see what the regulatory framework will look like, because then we'll see, hopefully in the supporting environment, much more products which can answer this question better in the future. So I think it's time. I think I covered pretty much the 6 question I wanted to speak today, and potentially we have still a few minutes to answer some of the questions. So first of all, thank you very much for watching us, and I try to answer some of the questions we received. So one question from Zaman, that how can we insert desired gene from different genus of crops? I think it was a possibility in the past as well. So we could use several transformation systems, either using agrobacteria or using gene gun, for instance, but also a genome editing. It's possible to insert a larger sequence of DNA in the genome. But again, what I told today, this is really not the purpose of the use of genome editing. The great potential it's still relies within the gene pool and this existing variation, and enriching this existing variation of the gene pool. So I think the future ways, there will be still transgenic crops in the future, but most of the genomic product we've foreseen won't be transgenic one, but using the small genetic changes and alternation in the genome. This is how they will improve in the future, and also make these varieties more efficient for conventional breeding as well. So I hope this covers the question very much. The other interesting question, that should gene-edited products be labeled as GMOs? And the question is clearly they shouldn't be labeled as GMOs. So if they are not GMOs, because with genome editing, we haven't introduced transgene in the genome, it means that they doesn't contain transgene. They still remained in the gene pool of the same species, so they shouldn't be regulated as GMOs, and therefore they shouldn't be labeled as GMOs. There is a good question from our friend Marcel Bruins. What is the ISF is doing to convince governments of the importance of the usefulness of new genetic techniques? I think this is a very good question, since we don't have an international regulatory framework for genome editing. For plant variety protection, we have UPOV. We have seed certification. We have the OECD seed schemes. But for genome editing, we don't have such international regulatory oversight. So it's basically up to the countries to develop their own regulatory system and also make steps to somehow align those regulation in order to provide sufficient trade, sea trade or trade of commodities. So what basically ISF does and did in the past, we try to engage with governments and we try to make governments to talk to each other, to exchange their views. So governments are coming from a little bit of different history because every country has a little bit of different regulatory framework. So we cannot aim to have like exactly the same regulation in every country because this is something which is really not possible. But at least we try to engage with them to create a policy environment where a product enters into this regulatory process, the outcome will be the same. So the scope of how it's determined, whether it's a conventional product or GMOs, will be the same. And the other importance to make government understand those objectives that this kind of technologies may help to achieve. So every government have sustainability goal, like European Union has the Green Deal and has the Farm to Fork strategy, for instance. And I think they have to realize that this is one of the tools that they can reach those goals. So in many countries are deciding to restrict the use of pesticides, for instance. So obviously you have to combat pests and diseases. So you have to have more resistance varieties to do that. So I think they have to understand that they set very ambitious targets and goals to green the economy. So we need to use tools to reach them. I think this is a very important aspect of how to convince governments. So maybe I have still time for an additional question. I try to find a nice one. Yeah, it's one question about the detection. It's certainly we can detect the changes on genome editing, even if this is a few base pair changes. It's detectable with current technologies, but we know in the first place where to look for, because we have millions of base pairs or billions of base pairs in a plant genome. If you don't know where to look for these few base pair changes, it's just impossible to find it. The second thing is that even if we know where to look for and what changes we need to look for, we don't know how these changes has been produced, especially with the small point mutation, insertion and deletion, because on the genomic level and the gene level, these base pair changes are equally the same as they were just happened spontaneously, or it has been produced random mutagenesis, such as radiation or chemical agents, or it has been produced by genome editing. So I think this is very important, and also shows why we shouldn't regulate differently, because even in this detection level, these are completely the same. So I think our time is pretty much up now. So we would like to conclude this short webinar. So many thanks for everybody for joining this session. I hope you had good information which you can use in the future. But before you go, we would like to show you a short 3 minutes video. This is one of the good example how genome editing can improve a crop which potentially nobody knew in the past. It's pennycress. So how a crop could be used in the future with these improved characteristics introduced by genome editing for various purposes. I think it's a very good one, and really sees the benefits and the potential of the technology. And this is only just one example, but very interesting to see. So thank you very much for your attention again, and stay tuned. And if you have anything, just let us know in the chat or in emails in the later. So thank you much for your attention. Bye.
As carbon emissions in the atmosphere reach dangerous levels, our window for finding and implementing solutions grows smaller every day. At Illinois State University, Dr. John Sedbrook focuses on improving crops and developing new sources of bioenergy from plants.
And I have a research lab that uses molecular genetics to improve crops. We're both developing a new crop called pennycress, which is related to canola, as well as improving the agronomic properties of other crops such as winter cereal rye. And I'm also director of a large DOE, Department of Energy grant here in the United States. And it's actually an international project to improve the genetic stress resilience of pennycress as it's becoming a new crop. Not that long ago, pennycress was thought of only as a weed, so it grows widespread on all continents in temperate regions. And it's, as I mentioned earlier, it's related to canola and other oil seeds like camelina and carinata. And we found that genetically this plant can be improved very rapidly. We are working with a startup company in St. Louis, Covercress Inc., that has a breeding program that's rapidly improving this crop, and will have their first commercial planting this fall throughout the Midwest. And our laboratory was actually involved in using CRISPR gene editing to rapidly domesticate this weed into a legitimate crop. And so this has really been a wonderful project that's involved academia and policymakers, as well as private industry, to develop this new crop that could be planted on tens of millions of acres. And the potential of this crop is to produce over 3 billion gallons of oil annually in the U.S. alone, that can be converted easily to biodiesel, renewable diesel, as well as biojet fuel.
Hey, sorry, I'm back again. I hope some of you stayed. My colleague informed me that there were also interesting questions in the comments which are missed. So I try to answer them then quickly. I hope the ones who are ask these questions still online, but it's gonna be recorded, so it could be listened later. So the question was from Angel, and I think he said the essence of his question, that what is our biggest challenging of use these technologies, and what is the biggest challenges of the implementation. I think the question is related more about this kind of regulatory framework we had, and obviously this is what we see. The biggest challenge. So we see the potential of the technology. We see the potential use, the diverse application, the diverse crops, the diverse developers behind, and because it's really democratized research. There is a really low level of entry, and you can use it, and you can improve your crops in developing countries and wherever. So the biggest challenge is the regulation. So if we have an incoherent regulatory system with the full risk assessment and all the other difficult administrative burdens, it just make the cost so high that many smaller developers many big developers don't have the financial means to meet those costs and challenges. So this is, then you will restrict the use to big multinational companies, to some higher beneficial crops, and so forth. So this is basically one aspect. The other aspect is the trade. So if you have a product which have a really like a patchwork of regulation in different countries, and you would like to trade those products in multiple countries, it just won't be possible. So it will make rethink the developers that if they develop a product, but they can just commercialize it in restricted areas, with always a danger that if it will be end up in other regions, it will be regulated as a GMOs with all the consequences of it. They won't put money and efforts in it. So first and foremost is the regulatory hurdle. There was a question of Jared. I think I partially answered this question when I gave my answer to Marcel. So what ISF is doing and how we try to create a coherent regulatory framework. And also the question relates that what ISF can do to have this kind of research cooperation, public-private. So I think this is already happening. ISF doesn't have too much role to enhance this kind of cooperation. I think we have to make sure that it will be still a possibility for the public institutes to get involved. And also, like in every research, and this was in the past as well, and it hasn't been really changed by genome editing. So public research and private research can work hand in hand, and both of them have different strengths we need to leverage. So obviously more basic research will be done also in the future in the public research areas, where seed companies knows the market better. So if it's already speaking about market-oriented applications, they are the ones who are much closer to the farmers. They understand their needs. So there's a very important feedback points for research and development. So I think we need to see what are the strengths in both sides, and we need to build on them. And this technology could be another example how to use this one. And I think if there is no question, I think many thanks to your attention again, and hope you see you in next occasions, either live or hopefully in person in the future. Thank you very much. Bye bye.